Have you ever noticed something strange? The people with the most authority rarely rush to explain themselves. Yet, the moment we feel misunderstood, we start talking. We defend. We justify. We overexplain. And somehow, the more we speak, the weaker we seem. Why? Because every extra sentence gives people another opportunity to question you. What if I told you that one of the fastest ways to lose power isn't making mistakes? It's trying too hard to convince everyone you didn't. Today we'll uncover one of Machiavelli's most overlooked psychological weapons, the power of saying less. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at silence the same way again. But first, I want you to write something in the comments. My silence is my strength. It seems simple, but by the end of this video, you'll understand why those 5 words can completely change the way people see you. Let's begin. Most people believe that if others misunderstand them, the solution is simple. Just explain yourself better. It feels natural. When someone questions your motives, judges your actions, or assumes the worst, your instinct is to defend yourself with more words. You begin adding context, telling the full story, hoping that if people only knew everything, they would finally understand. But this instinct quietly works against you. Every extra sentence gives your listener another detail to examine, another statement to question, another opportunity to doubt your confidence. Ironically, the harder you try to prove your innocence or justify your choices, the more you appear emotionally invested in winning their approval. Human psychology doesn't only listen to what you say, it studies how you say it. Hesitation, lengthy explanations, and unnecessary details often signal uncertainty, even when you're telling the truth. Think about 2 people accused of the same mistake. One calmly says, "That's not what happened," and moves on. The other spends 5 minutes explaining every tiny detail, hoping to erase all suspicion. Which one appears more confident? Most people instinctively trust the first, not because they have more evidence, but because certainty speaks briefly. This is the hidden trap. The moment you begin over-explaining, you shift from projecting confidence to seeking permission to be believed. And in that moment, without realizing it, you've handed the other person the position of judge, while placing yourself in the position of someone asking for approval. That is a trade powerful people rarely make. Watch the people who naturally command respect when they walk into a room. They aren't usually the loudest, the funniest, or the ones constantly trying to prove how intelligent they are. More often, they listen before they speak. They observe before they react. And when they finally say something, people pay attention because their words are rare, deliberate, and free from desperation. This is no accident. Every conversation contains an invisible struggle over attention, influence, and emotional control. The person who feels compelled to explain every decision or answer every criticism is quietly allowing others to dictate the conversation. They are reacting instead of leading. Truly powerful people understand that not every opinion deserves a response, and not every accusation deserves a defense. They recognize that silence can communicate confidence more effectively than 100 carefully chosen sentences. This doesn't mean they know everything or never make mistakes. It means they don't allow every challenge to pull them into emotional negotiations. They trust that their actions, consistency, and reputation will speak louder than endless explanations ever could. Machiavelli understood that authority depends as much on perception as on reality. Someone who appears certain of their direction naturally attracts confidence from others. Someone who constantly seeks to justify themselves appears dependent on outside approval. The less you chase validation, the more independent you appear. And independence is one of the strongest signals of power. because people instinctively follow those who seem completely capable of standing on their own. Silence has a strange effect on the human mind because people are naturally uncomfortable with uncertainty. When someone stops speaking instead of rushing to fill every pause, the brain immediately begins searching for meaning. It asks questions. What are they thinking? Why didn't they respond? Do they know something I don't? That unanswered space becomes far more powerful than another explanation ever could. Most people feel an irresistible urge to eliminate awkward pauses, so they keep talking until they accidentally reveal their emotions, insecurities, or intentions. The person who remains composed while everyone else rushes to fill the silence quietly gains control of the interaction. This is why experienced negotiators, skilled leaders, and confident individuals often pause before answering. They understand that silence slows the pace of the conversation and forces others to reveal more than they intended. In many situations, people begin answering their own questions, softening their arguments, or exposing weaknesses simply because the silence feels unbearable. Machiavelli recognized that influence is not always created through speech, but through restraint. Mystery invites curiosity, while constant explanation removes it. When every thought is immediately spoken, there's nothing left for others to wonder about. But when your words are measured and intentional, each sentence carries greater weight. People begin listening more carefully because they know you won't waste their attention with unnecessary talk. In a world where everyone competes to be heard, the person who masters silence often becomes the one while everyone watches. Overexplaining often begins with good intentions. You want to clear up a misunderstanding, avoid conflict, or prove that your choices make sense. But what starts as a simple explanation can quickly become a stream of unnecessary details that weaken your position. The more you talk, the more opportunities you create for others to question your logic, challenge your story, or notice the emotions behind your words. People are rarely evaluating every fact you present. Instead, they are reading your behavior. They notice the urgency in your voice, the need to justify yourself, and the fear of being judged. Those signals leave a stronger impression than the explanation itself. Imagine arriving late to a meeting. One person simply says, "Sorry, I'm late. Traffic was heavier than expected," and moves on. Another spends several minutes describing every turn, every delay, and every reason why it wasn't their fault. Which response feels more confident? Most people instinctively trust the first because confidence doesn't feel the need to overwhelm others with evidence. Machiavelli understood that power is closely tied to perception. Someone who appears calm under pressure naturally commands more respect than someone who desperately tries to control every opinion. This doesn't mean you should never explain yourself. It means your explanations should be intentional, concise, and given only when they truly matter. Every unnecessary sentence chips away at the image of certainty you want others to see. Sometimes the strongest message is not found in saying more, but in knowing exactly when to stop speaking. Human nature has always valued what feels scarce. We chase opportunities that seem limited, admire people who don't constantly seek attention, and place greater importance on things that aren't freely available. The same principle applies to your words. If every opinion, emotion, and thought immediately leaves your mouth, people gradually stop treating what you say as valuable. Your voice becomes background noise because there is no sense of anticipation. But when you speak with restraint, your words begin to carry weight. Others start paying closer attention because they know you don't speak simply to fill silence. This is one of the quiet secrets behind influence. Powerful people understand that attention is earned through selectivity, not constant visibility. They don't reveal every plan before it unfolds or announce every feeling the moment it appears. They recognize that mystery naturally invites curiosity, while complete transparency often invites unnecessary criticism. Machiavelli understood that people are drawn toward what they cannot fully predict or easily possess. A leader who remains composed and measured encourages others to observe more carefully, searching for meaning in every decision and every sentence. This doesn't mean becoming distant or emotionally unavailable. It means developing the discipline to share only what serves your purpose. Every unnecessary revelation gives away leverage, while every thoughtful pause preserves it. When people know that your words are chosen with care rather than spoken on impulse, they begin to assign greater value to everything you say. In the end, respect is often earned not by speaking more than everyone else, but by making every word feel worth waiting for. One of the quickest ways to surrender your power is to believe that every accusation deserves an answer. It feels unfair when someone misjudges your intentions or spreads a false impression. And your first instinct is often to correct the record immediately. But not every criticism is made in search of truth. Many are made to provoke a reaction. The moment you rush to defend yourself, you allow the other person to set the terms of the conversation. They decide the topic, they choose the frame, and you are left trying to escape it. This is exactly what emotionally intelligent people avoid. They understand that responding to every attack only gives it more attention and importance. Machiavelli recognized that power is not maintained by winning every argument, but by choosing which battles are worth fighting. Some accusations disappear when they receive no fuel. Others lose their force when your actions consistently contradict them over time. Your reputation is built far more by patterns of behavior than by clever explanations. Of course, there are moments when a clear response is necessary, especially when silence would allow serious harm or injustice to grow. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference. Before answering any criticism, ask yourself whether the other person genuinely wants understanding or simply wants a reaction. If their goal is conflict, your explanation will rarely satisfy them. In fact, it often encourages them to keep pushing because they know they have captured your attention. True strength is the ability to remain composed under pressure, refusing to let every opinion dictate your emotions. Sometimes your greatest victory comes not from delivering the perfect response, but from refusing to let someone else control your peace. One of the greatest paradoxes of authority is that the people who seem least concerned with convincing others are often the ones who inspire the most trust. At first, this appears backwards. We assume that confidence comes from having the perfect argument or the ability to answer every objection. In reality, genuine authority comes from an inner certainty that doesn't depend on constant approval. When you desperately need everyone to agree with you, your behavior subtly changes. You become more cautious, more defensive, and more willing to reshape your words just to avoid criticism. People notice this, even if they can't explain why. They sense that your confidence is being borrowed from their acceptance, rather than generated from within. Machiavelli understood that influence begins long before a single word is spoken. It begins with the impression that you are capable of standing by your decisions, even when they are unpopular. This doesn't mean becoming stubborn or refusing to learn from others. True authority is not arrogance. It is the quiet confidence to listen, evaluate, and still choose your own course without feeling compelled to justify every step. Ironically, the less you chase validation, the more others begin to offer it freely. They respect people who appear guided by principles instead of public opinion. Your calm becomes contagious, and your certainty gives others something stable to trust. The strongest leaders are rarely those who win every debate. They are the ones whose actions constantly reinforce their words. Over time, people stop asking whether they believe in themselves, because the answer is already obvious. That silent confidence becomes more persuasive than any explanation ever could. Speaking less is not the same as saying nothing. Silence without purpose can create distance, while words chosen with intention create influence. The difference lies in discipline. Most people speak the moment a thought enters their mind, reacting emotionally instead of responding strategically. They answer questions before considering the consequences, reveal plans before they are ready, and express frustrations they later wish they had kept private. Every impulsive sentence gives away information about their fears, desires, and weaknesses. Strategic speech works differently. Before speaking, it asks a simple question. Will these words strengthen my position or weaken it? If the answer is unclear, silence is often the wiser choice. Machiavelli understood that every conversation contains an opportunity either to increase your influence or to give part of it away. The people who command respect are rarely the ones who dominate every discussion. Instead, they observe carefully, gather information, and speak only when their words add value. Because they are not constantly talking, others naturally pay closer attention when they finally do. Their opinions carry weight precisely because they are offered sparingly. This approach also protects you from unnecessary conflict. Many arguments begin with words that never needed to be spoken in the first place. A thoughtful pause can prevent hours of regret. Strategic speech is not about manipulation or deception. It is about self-control. It is the ability to separate emotion from communication and intention from impulse. When every sentence serves a purpose, your words become more memorable, your presence becomes more commanding, and people begin to associate your voice with clarity instead of noise. That is the quiet language of real influence. Not every situation calls for silence, and not every accusation should be ignored. The mistake many people make is swinging too far in one direction, believing that power means never explaining anything at all. In reality, wisdom lies in knowing when explanation strengthens you and when it weakens you. There are moments where clarity is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of responsibility. When you are dealing with people who act in good faith, explanation builds trust rather than eroding it. Friends, family, teammates, and those genuinely seeking understanding deserve honesty and context. Because relationships are built on communication, not mystery. Machiavelli's perspective was never about shutting the world out completely, but about understanding human nature well enough to choose your responses carefully. Explanation becomes dangerous only when it is driven by fear. Fear of judgment, fear of misunderstanding, fear of losing approval. That kind of explanation is no longer communication. It becomes justification. The key difference is intention. Are you explaining to create clarity, or are you explaining to defend your ego? One strengthens connection, the other weakens authority. People with true confidence do not avoid speaking. They simply refuse to waste words on those who are not interested in truth. They explain when it serves a purpose, not when it serves anxiety. In this way, explanation becomes a tool rather than a habit. And like any tool, its value depends entirely on how and when it is used. The real power is not silence alone, but the intelligence to know when your voice will build something meaningful and when it will only drain your position. You cannot control how every person interprets you, no matter how carefully you choose your words. There will always be those who misunderstand, those who project their own assumptions onto your actions, and those who decide your intentions before you ever speak. Most people spend a large part of their lives trying to correct these distortions, believing that if they just explain themselves one more time in the right way, everything will finally be seen clearly. But perception is not something you fully command. It is something you influence indirectly through consistency, behavior, and time. The real shift happens when you stop treating every misunderstanding as a problem that needs immediate correction. Not because clarity doesn't matter, but because your energy is limited. Every moment spent trying to win over someone committed to misunderstanding you is a moment taken away from building the life that would eventually make the explanation irrelevant. Machiavelli understood this balance deeply. Reputation is not shaped by isolated arguments, but by repeated evidence of who you are when no explanation is offered. There is a point where constant justification becomes self-sabotage. It signals that your position depends on approval rather than conviction. And the more you try to control opinions through words alone, the more fragile your image becomes. Strength, on the other hand, is built when your actions are steady enough that they no longer require constant defense. In the end, most explanations are forgotten, but patterns are remembered. People may dispute your words in the moment, but over time, they cannot ignore consistency. What you repeatedly do becomes louder than anything you say about yourself. And eventually, the need to convince others fades, because reality has already spoken for you. So the real question is not how to make everyone understand you. It is whether you are willing to keep building something solid enough that understanding becomes inevitable, even without your permission. Everything you've heard comes down to one uncomfortable truth. Most people don't lose influence because they lack intelligence or capability, but because they give away too much of themselves in moments where silence would have protected their position. They explain too quickly, defend too emotionally, and speak too often in places where restraint would have carried more weight. If there is one thing to take with you from this, it is this. Power is not in constant explanation, but in measured presence, in the ability to remain steady even when others try to pull you into unnecessary justification. Now the real lesson becomes personal. Before you leave, write one affirmation in the comments that anchors this idea in your mind. Not for others, but for yourself. Something simple, something direct, something you can return to when the urge to over-explain shows up again. For example, my words are intentional, not reactive. Or, I do not explain myself to everyone. Choose one, or write your own. And let it be the line that reminds you who you are becoming when you choose to speak less and mean more.